August. I'm Stephen Ridgway. Firefox has released patches for a handful of flaws this month, so nothing 0 day, so not as critical as some of the stuff that's been patched recently, but it is worth checking to see that you are on the latest version of Firefox, and if not, make sure that you are updating new versions. If you're aiming for Firefox 116 or Firefox 115.1, if you're the user of the extended support release. Thunderbird 115.1 as well. So worth having a look to check that your particular copies of Firefox stuff has been updated. Yeah, because it's better to keep on top of it, even though there's nothing that looks to be particularly critical at the moment. There is a new variant of the Node Stealer malware. This particular variant has got the ability to take over Facebook business accounts and to take control of cryptocurrency wallets. So, research by Palo Alto's network unit 42. I said that very badly, didn't I? Palo Alto Networks Unit 42 has discovered this new version. New version is written in Python, which is a change to the previous variants. So that is something to look out for. A slight change in functionality, whilst it continues to, both the new and the old variant, two new variants and one old variant, are all involved in stealing Facebook business account information and browsers data. One of the new variants has the ability to take over the Facebook account. They use Telegram for exfiltration. One of the variants will read your emails and has the ability to download further malware. Can disable Windows Defender, which is worth knowing about. And has certain anti-analysis features built into it. So have a read of the article, and yeah, just be aware. So it targets multiple browsers, including Chrome, Edge, Brave, Opera, various other browsers as well, undoubtedly. So keep an eye out for that one. Canon has released an advisory saying that around 200 models of their printer are not deleting Wi-Fi settings properly if you do a basic clean it up in order to sell it on kind of activities. Reason why this, of course, would matter would be, let's say you buy a second-hand Canon printer, which people do on eBay all the time. You don't really want to find other networks, keys and things sitting in a device which is supposed to have been cleaned. So basically, they've come up with some mitigations that they recommend that users do when the printer is going to be handed over for whatever reason to a third party. So they, I think, are basically saying you need to take some manual steps to clear out the Wi-Fi details before you let people have access to your computer. Otherwise, you run the risk of leaking information. The ever-growing ways in which people avoid email controls for phishing. It never ceases to amaze me how much lengths people will go for this stuff. Quite clever. However, equally, the other side of it is there are times when perfectly legitimate systems are, as it were, misused. Yeah, they are. They're misused to help phishing campaigns be successful. Well, one of these useful but now being abused solutions is Google AMP. Now, Google AMP is accelerated mobile pages. Different from any other kind of AMP. There are various AMPs out there, but this AMP is Google AMP. And the idea is that Google effectively preloads parts of and pre-hosts parts of websites for mobile devices in order for those sites to load faster on mobile devices. Kind of the way it works is that the URLs start with https www.google.com /amp/s/ and then the actual website that you're trying to go to for /example.com /path kind of thing. Now, if the actual URL that's appended to the Google piece is a phishing URL, a lot of email protection software won't spot it because it's looking at the initial Google piece. So if you put a phishing URL at the end, it is quite likely that email will get delivered. So interesting. I would be fairly certain that Google will work with most major anti-phishing vendors in order to fix this. But right now, just got to be a little bit careful. If the links that you are going to on mobile devices points to a Google AMP page, you may not be getting all of your expected anti-phishing protection from whatever platform you use in order to do that. Interesting article in Dark Reading that is basically saying there's an uptick in interest amongst cybercrime groups in Mac OS devices. So there's a reasonably new Trojan, which I think is being called Tricky. So Tricky malware. It is a hidden virtual network computing, so HVNC type of malware. VNC being, it's one of those remote access, remote control type piece of software. I'm sure most of us who've worked in computing for a while have at some point or another used it. Very useful from a IT admin perspective. However, if installed stealthily, does allow attackers to take control of your machine. So the fact that it can do it is, that's not particularly new. The particular HVNC malware that's has been identified since April, but there are updates being made to it in July, only a couple of weeks ago, and it will work on macOS versions from 10 through to 13.2 at least. So why is this important? Well, as part of the research, the team that have come across this has said that there's been a definite increase in talk on cybercrime forums about macOS tools, and there is potentially going to be a surge in attacks against macOS devices. So whilst I know that most people now don't consider Macs to be inherently indestructible, but they are still um, more secure than some other operating systems, but from the point of view that they are less targeted. So there's less malware out there and probably fewer known exploited vulnerabilities. But that doesn't mean to say that if groups put their mind to it, they couldn't find ways to new vulnerabilities, new ways to exploit things, so on and so forth. So if you are running Macs in your environment, very much strongly recommend you take the usual precautions, run some anti-malware. There is good anti-malware for Macs. Have a search. Can't recommend anything. I know what I use, but I'm not in the business of trying to recommend things to people in that space at the moment. But have a look. There is stuff out there. The big vendors do malware, anti-malware for macOS. Make sure that you are being careful around the use of user accounts. If you are particularly concerned, there are CIS benchmarks for most versions of macOS, which will give you some very good pointers as to how you can harden the operating system, because although it does come out of the box fairly hard, it isn't perfect. And also some of the things that are implemented out of the box, especially if you're in the more techie end of the game, you will have undoubtedly punched some holes through stuff around that sort of gatekeeper and protection stuff, because you'll undoubtedly have been needing to install and do things that Apple didn't perhaps think of when they were assuming people were going to be using these devices. So keep an eye out for this, and make sure that you've got your basic cyber hygiene in good state for any Mac devices that you may have. And then finally, from me, a little bit more government overreach. UK spy agencies want to relax what they call burdensome laws on AI data use. So GCHQ, MI5, and MI6 propose to weaken the safeguards that limit the training of AI models by using bulk personal data sets. So it's if I thought they were any good at keeping data safe, and if I actually thought that they knew what they were doing, you could argue that it is useful for them to have it. But I'm not entirely sure that AI is mature enough in this space, and I really don't believe that government agencies either are they're neither very good at looking after the data that they've got, but equally they are not good at using that data for what I think most voters, most citizens would consider legitimate purposes. If it was purely used for targeting real criminals or potential terrorist activity, that sort of stuff, it would be fine. But as we've seen, the law enforcement and security services get called in to do all sorts of slightly dodgy stuff. Over the pandemic in the UK, there were some very high-powered security service groups that were sent off to go and track people's Twitter responses to see if they were positive or negative about government announcements, and put people effectively on blacklists if they didn't agree with the rubbish that was being spouted by the government. So yeah, allowing GCHQ, MI6, and MI5 to train their AI on my data sounds pretty dodgy. The privacy laws, by the way, the restrictions or controls actually around how to use this data were put in place, generally put in place around 2016 after the disclosures by Edward Snowden about intrusive state surveillance, mostly in the US, but kind of effectively across the world. And we all know that our secret services follow very much the same lines as those in the US, and I'm sure there's a lot of data sharing in the background. So controls were put in place because of massive abuse of power in the past, and they are now arguing, the spies are now arguing that they should remove these controls because they're all nice people, really. That is probably enough of my government overreach rant for one day. So thank you all for listening. Hope you have a great Wednesday. It's all downhill from here to the weekend, so enjoy it, and I'll speak to you again tomorrow morning.